So we will move on to issue 9 at this time, Developmental Services Advocacy Request System Funding. I'd like to invite those on the panel for issue 9 to come forward. I also want to recognize a former member of this assembly, Guy Houston, who will be presenting as well. So welcome. Please.
All right. Chairman Arambula and colleagues of Budget Subcommittee 1. I'm honored to come before you today to present this proposal to deposit all savings from the closure of the developmental centers and any revenue generated from the sale of those properties into the Department of the Developmental Services Trust Fund. The proposal as requires that any revenue generated from the reuse or continued innovative use of those properties, like what's happening at Harbor Village or any other similar mixed-use housing project, such as the proposed Shannon's Mountain, should be deposited into the same fund. This fund should be protected. It should be subject to the appropriation by the legislature, but only to the State Department of Developmental Services, DDS, for the benefit of programs, services, and providers who care for, house, employ, and otherwise enrich the lives of the developmentally disabled Californians. It should never, under any circumstances, revert to the general fund. As the 3 remaining DCs are set to close by 2021, it is essential that these savings are not just lost to the general fund and spent on unrelated programs. Additionally, this proposal contains a provision that requires that we hold off on any further liquidations of the remaining 3 developmental center properties until we can convene a working group to determine how those properties can be utilized to benefit the developmentally disabled community. The intent is not to violate the constitutional requirements of disposition of surplus properties, but rather to ensure that the value of the properties is maximized for the DD community, preferably in an ongoing way, if at all possible. As clients are shifted out of DCs, DDS allocates funds to private nonprofit entities known as regional centers, which are required to provide or arrange for the provisions of services and supports for persons with developmental disabilities. To give you all a sense of the potential savings that might be available, the average state cost to serve a client in a DC for the 2017-18 budget year is expected to be approximately $700,000 per person. By contrast, the Legislative Analysis Office found in 2015 that the average cost to deliver services to the similar client through regional center system is between $75,000 and $300,000 per year. Right now, any cost savings realized through the closure of DCs or even the shutdown of a single unit of a DC goes to the general fund. Those savings do not flow to the regional center programs to help serve the clients in the community. There's a problem here because we have clients going from DCs over to regional centers, and instead of the funding following them there, it's going to the general fund. This investment made into the state system to support the developmentally disabled by the MCO package passed in the 2016 special session were a good start. But we must do more to help the developmentally disabled lead lives that maximize their opportunities and participate in the community with dignity. Already, increases in the minimum wage have started to erode the positive impacts of these improvements. As this population increases and the DCs close and our DD community is served entirely by regional center programs, we must ensure that we find innovative ways to adequately resource their special needs without breaking the state's budget. Since no savings from the DC closures have yet been identified or worked into DDS or general fund budget projections, this request should have no identifiable general fund impact. I deeply appreciate your time and attention to this important issue and to my request today.
Thank you, Assemblymember Mathis. I'd like to give the department a chance now, if you will.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. John Doyle, Department of Developmental Services. We completely appreciate the good intention behind Assemblymember Mathis's proposal, and do agree that additional funding can do a lot of good for our community. However, I think the thing we would want to point out is that from a department perspective, our regional center budget is fully funded. While we understand there are other priorities that the community is concerned about, and we're concerned as well, issues like local minimum wage, unfunded state and federal mandates, we're aware of these issues, but we think these issues have to be considered in light of the other competing general fund priorities throughout the state budget.
Department of Finance, LAO, any comments on this?
Hi. Sonia Pettick, Legislative Analyst's Office. Without speaking to the merits of the proposal, we'd just like to raise a couple issues for consideration. And we have already talked about some of these with staff. The state certainly can expect to recoup some savings ultimately once the developmental centers are closed, particularly because the state will not have to run the facilities or staff the facilities anymore. However, as Mr. Doyle pointed out, there may be some issues when it comes to trying to figure out, let me start over. As Mr. Doyle said, the Regional Center Community Services budget is fully funded each year, and it may be difficult to calculate the actual savings from the developmental centers to the regional centers simply because the true cost to serve someone in the community is not something that's easy to calculate. There's the purchase of service budget among the regional centers, but there's also other costs that are harder to calculate, such as generic services accessed by regional center consumers through programs like Medi-Cal. And finally, I would just note that earmarking the funds for the Department of Developmental Services, or earmarking the savings, may be a legislative priority, but it would also reduce the flexibility of the legislature to use those funds for other purposes.
Thank you. Any public comment on this issue at this time? Please come forward and state your name and affiliation.
Vanessa Garcia from the Department of Finance. Apologies. The Department of Finance is opposed to this proposal because it is inconsistent with the state's current practices regarding the sale of state-owned property. In addition, all savings from the closure of the developmental centers should go to the general fund for overall budgeting decisions in the future.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members, and distinguished staff, Rick Rollins, representing ARCA, Association of Regional Center Agencies. We have a longstanding policy of trying to retain as much funding from our overall system in our system moving forward, and we appreciate efforts to do that. We want to lend our voice of support for this, and all measures. This is really a nonpartisan issue. We have folks on both sides of the aisle that support the idea of retaining funds in our system. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm back. My name is Jackie Dillard-Foss with the California Supported Living Network, and I think I would argue with that our regional center system is fully funded. If you look at the comparison of the developmental center staff and the pay they receive and the direct support professionals in our community doing the exact work with the exact complex needs, because my agency serves very complex need individuals, and my higher rate is $11.50. The state is not hiring people at the developmental center at $11.50 an hour. The folks that I support have J-tubes, G-tubes, complex behavioral services. And we're saying that there's funding that could be used for other services. When $15 an hour hit, what we're saying, and I'm going to just say one little thing. I was talking to the National Alliance of Direct Support Professionals, and the Bureau of Labor Relations, he asked the question, why is our community of direct support professionals so underfunded in comparison to, say, a CNA? The average wage across our nation is $10.09. And she said, because she's an analyst, she said it's because you require lower cognitive ability for those you hire. And we're saying to our community that these direct support professionals are people with lower cognitive ability, and I argue they are not. Our system must, if we are talking about 330,000 plus the 700 individuals that are left at the developmental center coming into our community, we as the state of California, the great state of California, have to say these direct support professionals need to be recognized for direct support profession. And so they are not lower cognitive ability. And so we must, every dollar that's available to this system needs to stay in this system. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members, thank you very much for having this hearing today. It's very special that you would do this. Guy Houston, I'm with Mission Hope Day program. We serve 450 special people every single day, and I was a former member up here, so kind of in your shoes as well. To hear the statement that the system is fully funded is an inaccurate one. There was a fantastic thing that happened last year where there was a raise and an increase. What not a lot of members don't know is that was the first increase in over 12 years, and there actually were reductions along the way. And so we're just getting to the point where now we can pay our people minimum wage to serve our clients. It seems very reasonable that monies that are in the DD system now stay in the DD system. It's kind of special. It's unusual. Again, being in your shoes formally, is that we're not asking for a sales tax increase. We're not asking for any kind of tax increase. We're not trying to take it from somebody else because, as you know, that can be incredibly difficult as well. And so monies that are in the system can stay here. It's unfortunate there have been developmental centers in the past that have closed, and those savings back then weren't kept in the system. We might not be in the same condition we are today. So with potential $500,000, yes, there are costs, but there's scores of tens of millions of dollars available. Keep it in the system to serve all these great people that are providing for the most unfortunate in our communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And welcome back.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members. Barry Giardini from the California Disability Services Association. I want to thank Assemblymember Mathis for bringing this issue to all of our attention today. I'm going to join the trend and say that we certainly take issue with the fact that services are currently fully funded. I think if that were the case, you wouldn't see such significant staff turnover. You wouldn't see programs who aren't able to take more clients on because they don't have DSPs to actually serve the individuals. So fundamentally, I think that there still are shortages, and I know Mr. Doyle and the department are well aware of some of the other unfunded mandates that are facing providers now. So this money, if we can keep it in the system, it certainly would go a long way to alleviating some of those concerns and also building up some of the system supports for the more challenging individuals, not just the people transferring out of the DCs, but those who are already being served in the communities who deserve better services that might not be available today. So we have a source of funding. And just to point out, in this year's budget, we're proposing to take from the community side budget to pay for a shortfall in the DC budget, right? So in that context, the money's fungible, right, between the DCs and the community side. Well, if it can go that way to fund a shortfall in the DCs, I would contend that it should go the other way as well, and so that the DC budget should also be available to fund the community system and make it as thriving and it as wonderful as we all know and hope it can be. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. Bob Giovatti with the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. Also want to thank Assemblymember Mathis for bringing this issue forward. From the standpoint of the council is formed by state and federal law to make sure that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities have the services and supports they need. And we can put a fine point, I think, in this conversation, and it's appropriate to do so, on how much the savings will be and what fund it might go to and what silo we want to function it or put over on the side here to actually hold the money. But at the end of the day, really, page 30, the final sentence here, I think nails it as far as the council is concerned. Mandate the framework by which the state retains savings and revenues from the closures of DCs for the benefit of the developmentally disabled community. Keep the money in the system, regardless of what we think the amounts are going to be, or maybe we're not exactly sure what the total savings are going to be. That's really not the point from where the council is coming from. This is money that's already available. It's already being spent, regardless of what the final tally is at the end of the day. The money's there. We're not asking, as other speakers have pointed out, for a new tax or to create some other revenue stream. So thank you very much for hearing this important issue.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christy Sepulveda-Burchett from Educate Advocate. We're a statewide grassroots nonprofit organization that serves families with special needs children, and we are definitely in support of making sure that the funding follows the person with exceptional needs and not back to the general fund. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. Jordan Lindsay, Executive Director of the ARC of California, as well as Chair of the Landerman Coalition, which represents a coalition is made up of 24 statewide agencies and organizations representing people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. As previous speakers have stated, we appreciate the department's statement, but we have to disagree that the system is fully funded. And I've been up and down the state speaking with providers and families and individuals who may have had a therapy who don't anymore because of certain cuts, may have had a certain service who no longer have that, and who are still unable to maximize their potential and opportunities in the community. And so we disagree that it's fully funded at this point. And so there are a couple things. One is the savings that will occur for the $500+ million. And there's already, as we understand, a fund set up within DDS, the DDS Trust Fund, which is already set up in statute where the funds could be distributed to. And as well, there's the second issue, which is the properties themselves. And those properties could be one-time or ongoing revenue to provide critical services for the people in the community. And we hope that the legislature will agree that just because precedent says that these funds, the proceeds from these, whether it's ongoing or one-time of these properties, will go into the general fund, doesn't mean that we have to do it this time. Those properties have been here, and they've been supporting the community forever, the system forever, and they can continue to do that in a very real, tangible, important way. And so we hope the legislature will agree with that. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having this hearing. My name is Connie Layton. I guess you'd call me a tiger mom. I am a volunteer advocate for people with disabilities as a family member. My son's 49. Which means he was diagnosed a long time ago. And before he was legally entitled to services, when there was no hope, no technology, and no legal standing. We were all powerless. And I feel like I'm lucky I can still be here and remind people of how important this is for families and to be able to speak as a mom. In 1969, Frank Landerman passed this amazing law. I have a copy of it, the original and the one now, that I carry around with near my heart. In 1970, my son was diagnosed with autism. So he and our family, we grew up with the Landerman Act, with the hopes, the dreams. I actually believe there was a word called in perpetuity that would mean it would last forever and ever, but also with chronic underfunding. And I'm sorry to say I do not believe the system is fully funded when we have such a diverse community that is underserved, and there are so many, and there isn't a real safety net. There's plans for a safety net. So I take issue with that. I know I can't get fired. That's the best job. I've often testified in this building, and I learned very quickly how important this building is, and you guys are, and you women are, and you people are. I also was the lone community mom that said, support the community, in opposition to the DC parents that said, support the DCs. And it was awful. You had a mom here and a mom here, and we were saying kind of the same thing, but we were on opposite sides. That's over. That's no more. We all want the same thing. I served as the first autism representative, you can figure out how old I am, before there was 21 regional centers. So I've watched this whole system grow. I now serve on the DS task force that was the DC task force under Secretary Diana Dooley. And we, families of children and adults in the DCs, we, family as children and adults in the community, we all want the same thing. We want meaningful, personalized, sustainable, appropriate supports for our children and adults in the community, where they live self-determined lives with freedom, authority, responsibility, and confirmation and validation of the critical role we as families play and people with disabilities play in their own lives. October 2013, Governor Brown signed the self-determination law. Was the only law in the country by itself saying people will have a self-determined life. And it was a cost-effective alternative to the traditional system. So we are working to make the system work. It's not like we are asking for all the money in the world. We just want to have the supports that are in the Lanterman Act. Now we need the infrastructure, a place to live, someone to walk in the door that's trained and can support your person, employment opportunities, and a real operational safety net that's sustainable and there's timely crisis capacity with exceptions. This is not happening now. I know there's plans. I'm on all these committees and I go to all these meetings. There's great plans, but not now. I have a son who's in special forces. Boots on the ground. No, not right now for our safety net. There's so much unmet need, underserved, diverse, aging, including me, severely challenged populations impacted by chronic underfunding. So let's be fiscally wise, capture what is ours, and use this opportunity, please, to secure a safety net that is not a jail, that is not the Institute for Mental Disease, it's not the streets. My husband's going to be 80 next month. I'm close behind, and I'm really scared. So I want to welcome you and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good afternoon, committee chair and members. My name is Terry DeBell. I represent families from Fairview and Porterville Developmental Centers. I'm a family member also of someone with a disability, my brother Patrick, now deceased, who lived at home, at Lanterman Developmental Center, and in the community. And I want to thank Assembly Member Mathis for recognizing the value of and the need for the protection of the developmental center budget and physical assets for the use of everyone served by the system. Because of my brother, I've been involved my whole life in this system, which is rapidly becoming unified with the closure of the DCs and the transition of almost everyone into the community setting, along with at least some experienced and qualified DC staff and effective programs. The bitter and time-wasting and spirit-draining and absolutely impossible arguments that we used to have about DCs versus the communities can now be set aside, and to a large part they have been. Now there's pretty much a unified community of advocates that understand that one of the biggest determinants of how individuals succeed is to provide the services and supports that they need. And that only happens when those services and supports are on a solid and continuous financial footing. When those supports fail, true capacity can and does result. The California legislature voted to close the developmental centers. Along with that comes an obligation to ensure that the community care of the DC movers and all others served by the system is adequately funded. The closure of the DC should be an opportunity to get more funds to community services instead of just a budget savings. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Arlene Holden with Easter Seal. Very well said by Terry, of course, and of course we're in support. We've been very pleased to be able to help people move from developmental centers. We're very pleased to be able to help people stay in the community, especially now that there is not going to be a developmental center for people to go into. We really need those resources built in the community. The housing is a huge issue that we're all facing. The investment that the state made in these centers and in these facilities is significant as the real estate has gone up in those areas. You've got to figure it's a huge challenge for people, both those who are now getting deflected as well as those who we are reintegrating into the community. So keeping this resource and keeping housing, that infrastructure for housing is one piece that I haven't heard the prior speaker speak on, so I just wanted to highlight that as well. But thank you for considering it.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Janelle Lewis. I serve on the State Council on Developmental Disabilities, where I chair the Legislative and Public Policy Committee. I'm also the parent of an adult with a developmental disability, and I'm also a volunteer advocate who's assisted families impacted by autism for almost 20 years. There's not a day that goes by that I don't hear from panicked family members about the lack of services and supports that exist in our community. We have increasing numbers that are becoming adults with developmental disabilities, and I do not understand the statement about our system being fully funded. I encourage you to support taking the funding from the DC closures and applying that to the system in which it should be applied. Thank you.
Thank you.
Randy Hicks, California's Disability Rights. We agree with that. Thank you, Mr. Mathis. It just seems to me that every time we put any kind of sale or money into the general fund, it stays into the general fund, and then everybody has to fight over that. Health and Human Services is over 20% of the budget. Can you imagine every time we have a budget fight, DDS has to continue to fight for something? And it was their land in the first place. It was their buildings in the first place. It just doesn't make any fiscal sense for this to happen. So for me, I concur with all the speakers here. The system is underfunded, and to keep it funding, they should be able to keep their own money. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, I'm Colleen Fernandez, and I'm here on behalf of my two autistic daughters, Kelly and Katrina, 46 and 36 years old. I agree with what everyone has said. I feel it is underfunded. My one daughter is on a waiting list for a day program, so she sits at home. She has an abscess, and we're fighting to get her to see Dr. Begal with the insurance. It was denied, and I had to go to the Department of Health and Human Services to have it overturned, and she still hasn't been seen yet. So imagine having abscesses and in pain, and you're still waiting, to be seen. Their voice would be, please have the money follow the people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good luck with that. Yeah. I mean it, really. I'm sorry I have to concur with the last speaker because we're well aware of the dental issue that she spoke with. But my name is Al Milan. This is my daughter, Molly. Molly, I'm going to say a few things right now. Okay, right now about you? All right, thank you. My daughter's 26 years old. Almost 26 years ago, we visited a couple of doctors when she was just a little girl, and they told us to put her somewhere where someone else can take care of her and go ahead and live her life. That probably would have been a developmental center, most definitely. My wife and I chose that would not be the path that we took. We have had Molly with us, and we will continue to have her with us probably for as long as we live. And that's why I'm here requesting that any money saved from closing down the developmental centers should go to support families like ours and individuals whose parents are no longer with them, and rely on this group of community supporters that you see before us. One of the biggest problems we face is high staff turnover at every level of service in our community, and that is something that hopefully the infusion of this money could help. But there are many other areas, but I'll keep it brief. I'm here to request that the money saved from closing down the developmental centers go directly into the community that serves these children and adults. Thanks very much for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Molly.
Pardon me.
I'm serving multiple functions today. I'm here for Elizabeth Drake. The irony is that Elizabeth doesn't have her speech device because her power chair is broken, and so she can't mount her Dynavox to be able to have her own voice. So as we talk about funding and money following the person and why this community needs to be more funded, I also am a proud provider for Colleen and her two daughters, and Katrina cannot just go to a dentist. She needs to have that dentistry. So it's a very passionate thing, but I'm going to shut up because Elizabeth is going to hit me. So I will now be a speech device. Hello, my name is Elizabeth Drake. I want to first say thank you for your time. I'm living with cerebral palsy. I am a consumer advocate at the agency called STEP. strategies to empower people. On behalf of myself and the STEP agency and all of the developmentally disabled community, I would like to say that the system is still in crisis. My life is in your hands. The lack of funding for the developmentally disabled is outrageous. In my life, I live on my own and I work in the community. I also have high service needs and personal care needs, such as changing, eating, grooming, and other basic needs. When I hire staff, it's really hard to keep them. The amount of work and care they do does not compare to how much they are being paid, so they quit and I have to start all over again looking for staff. This interrupts my work and my personal life. I have seen countless agencies go out of business due to not enough funding. I do not ever want to go back to a group home or go back to not enjoying the life to the fullest. I enjoy my independence and being a valued member of the community and want to keep it that way. It's very disappointing to me that people can fund basketball stadiums but can't seem to keep up with the funding for people with developmental disabilities. The funding has to stay within the developmentally disabled community and those who work the hardest to support people within our community. Without my direct support professional, how can I live? Who's going to provide my G-tube feeding and changing? Someone like me would end up in an institution, and I'm afraid of being abused or isolated, and that would cost the state, obviously, millions of dollars. Instead, I have the privilege of living in my own home and working in my community. I really do work and pay taxes just like everyone else. I will no longer be ignored. My staff is barely making minimum wage, and they actually quit and go to McDonald's, who pays more. My day program and services are being cut. The list really does go on, and the time to act is now with this additional funding. I can no longer wait. This is a state of emergency. The community, again, continues to be on the brink. The budget you used to fund the institutions and other similar settings should now go into the developmentally disabled community as it aims to support our independent living. It's time to invest that money in the community. The work and care that is done in the community by direct support professionals doesn't compare to the developmental centers. My staff does the exact same job as a state employee in the DC center. Matter of fact, they probably do it better. My staff doesn't even get paid half as much as those state employees doing the same job, and this is not right. The time is now. I ask now that the DD community is not forgotten in the future. Please always remember to keep the promise, and that once was made. Once again, thank you.
Thank you.
And that's it for me. Goodbye.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Meadows. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a voter, and I support. And I live with a roommate. It depends on 24/7 support, and I believe we should continue to support community funding. Because without that, most of us won't have a quality life. So again, remember, I'm a voter and a taxpayer, and proud of it. So I strongly support community funding.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Matthew Sparks. I'm an advocate for more than 100 people with intellectual developmental disabilities. More than 100 people with families who depend on us. I hope you understand that. Your constituents all depend on this service. We provide something that our founding fathers set out. Thomas Jefferson flat out said, we have inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Don't take the money away. Doing that, we can't do our jobs. I love my job. I can't pay my bills with love. These are my friends. These are my family members. You don't get to do this. You get to take care of us because we take care of them. We take care of our community. You're a part of our community. The smart thing here is to make sure that when I'm hiring staff to take care of my people, that they are paid well enough that they get to stay in that job, that they want that job. It's a good job. I hire people with PhDs, master's degrees, bachelor's, and even just high school diplomas because they do their job and they do it well. These are very intelligent people. They take care of equally intelligent people. They just have disabilities. They can't always express themselves. They need their devices, our facilitated communicators. They need their insurance. They need their homes. Where are you going to put them? Are you going to put them in prison because they act differently? They misbehave socially? No. They have a home. They have staff. They need their staff. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, I'm a PA for a company here in Sacramento called Creative Living Options. I am one of those staff. I've worked in this field 7 years. I haven't had a raise in 7 years. I go into these people's homes and I take care of them. And the turnover rate for people like me are very rare in this industry because people don't hang around when you can't pay your bills. So the turnover rate and staff. I'm what's considered a lead staff in the house I'm at, and I hire people to come in, and they come and they're there for a couple months and then they're gone because there's no. Don't take this money from these people. Don't take the money from the people who need to come and take care of them, because it's so hard to find good people as it is already. So that's it. That's it. Thank you. I'm Dina.
Thank you.
Hello, Dr. Rambula. Rick Hodgkins. I met you at Chicory, and I'm friends with you on Facebook. For those of you who have heard me speak before, I am a disability rights advocate, disability rights activist, and disability rights extremist. I am a proud client of Alta California Regional Center, Strategies to Empower People, and Futures Explored. Futures is where I get my job training and supports from, and some educational support. Speaking of education, I just wanted to point out that the school system failed me, so I think for our population, the regional centers should be involved in every step of the client's life, not just when they age out of the school system. Because I failed the school system failed me, I didn't fail it. But I was fortunate enough to be born at a time that I did not have to go into a DC, a developmental center, although I went into a place similar to a DC. It's in Senator Wykowski's district, and it's in Assemblyman Kansen Chu's district, and that's the California School for the Blind. With regards to funding for the regional centers, I think the first thing that we need to do, and I'll try to be as quick as I can here, but here's what I think should happen. The first thing that we need to do is the money that DDS gets from the federal government, that's Medicaid money. And we're being told that when it comes to things that Medi-Cal won't pay for, that we still need to access Medi-Cal first because Medi-Cal is considered a generic resource. What's the point of accessing Medi-Cal when we know that Medi-Cal won't pay for something that we need, and we're using the same money? DDS and the regional centers get the exact same pot of money, which is Medicaid money. Second, we need to restore social recreation programs like the one that Lighthouse Living Services had, where they took clients bowling into the Jelly Belly factory at certain times of the year. And also summer camp, therapeutic horseback riding. I think we need to get rid of the provision of the Lanterman Act that says that we need to use generic resources. I think people should be encouraged to use generic resources, not mandated, especially if they've been down that road before. Also, we need to allow independent living instructors to transport clients in their vehicles only when the instructor and client our meeting, because while the regional center does pay for transportation, what if the paratransit drops them off too late, or the bus is too late, or the independent living instructor has another client to see and can't wait for the client? And they can get the hours done a lot faster that way too. Again, I can't stress this enough. The money that DDS and the regional centers get is the same pot of money that Medi-Cal gets, which is Medicaid money. Let's, allow regional center clients shouldn't have to use Medi-Cal if they already know that Medi-Cal is not going to pay for anything, whether it's low vision aids or like what I use, or dental care that Medi-Cal can't pay for. Finally, I am a representative of the Department of Developmental Services Consumer Advisory Committee. I serve Alpine, Colusa, El Dorado, Nevada, Placer, Sacramento, Sierra, Sutter, Yolo, and Yuba counties. And I'm also a member of Capital People First. I'll speak on their behalf, but not on the CAC's behalf. Please, we need this money. What we did last year was just a start. Don't stop there. We got to keep going, regardless of what the Governor Brown says. Regardless of what the governor says, don't rubber stamp what he wants. Do what your constituents are telling you. Put this money where it needs to go, and that is not the general fund. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Kelly Young. I wear a couple different hats today. My most important hat is the mother of a 20-year-old daughter who has cerebral palsy and epilepsy. So we have been in the system since her birth. And she is getting ready to transition out of high school and into the big world of adult services. And we're concerned. And I think as many of the parents that are here, once you have a child with a disability, your whole life changes. And for many of us, and I have a couple over here, their focus becomes the system that supports their children, and I'm one of them. When my daughter was younger, I heard about the landmark case that said the DCs, it's unconstitutional to put people in these institutions. And for the last 15 plus years, I've seen how much we've spent on continuing to operate those DCs. And it shocked my conscience, actually, for the few people that were there, and comparing it to what we were paying for people who were living independent lives, having choices, and living full lives in the community. So for me, I look at it more from what are we valuing? So in the past, we valued putting people in institutions. We put a lot of money in there. We have a lot of assets there. And now that we're moving away from that, where is that value now? Where's the value? Are you just going to take all that money away and put it back and let this system, which is a life raft that is sinking? For me, it is a human right that we take care of people who need our assistance. And I just hope you think about that, because at any point in time in your life, you might have your sibling, your spouse, your child, your niece, your grandchild either be born with a disability or have a disability. And when you are in that position, you will understand the position we're in. Every person has value, and they should be part of our community. And we still have people that are segregated. If you were at the press conference, you saw my daughter sitting next to the microphone. She has a very inclusive life, but we worked really hard for it. And she's a beautiful, gregarious little girl, so it's easy for her to be included in society. Not so for every person. And it breaks my heart when I see that we still don't value people with disabilities, and that they are still segregated and on the sidelines. And I think if it was any other, my words are going, any other category of people in our society, people would be outraged. And I don't know why we're not outraged and how we can still discriminate against people with disabilities. So it's very near and dear to my heart. I work with families that have little kids with disabilities, and so I'm looking prospectively at what's waiting for them when their kids grow up. So I'm part of the Early Start Family Resource Centers and the network. I also work with IDA, which is the Infant Development Association of California, which is the wonderful professionals that support these kids. And we are all really concerned about what the future looks like for our kids. And it's in your hands, and I wish my daughter was sitting here, because you need to look in their eyes and say, are they worthy? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Betsy Cates, and I'm a board member of the ARC of California. I'm also the mother of a 35-year-old son with an intellectual disability, and I have spent most of those 35 years in some meeting like this at one time or another advocating for the preservation of this system. These issues have been going on for a long time, and we certainly need a long-term sustainable solution and not just a Band-Aid on it from year to year, because we're always back again. Fill in the halls here. We don't have anywhere else to go. This is where the solutions need to be found. The need to restore our system and invest in services is felt by individuals with developmental disabilities, their families, the direct support professionals who work in the community, and the people who keep the fragile programs going. People are at the heart of what we do, and we need to retain dedicated workers in our system and pay them in a way that's commensurate with the valuable work that they do. So we definitely hope that you find the way to ensuring that money saved upon closure of the developmental centers is directed into the system of community services to benefit individuals in the community. And from everything I'm hearing, I think we all feel the same way, so I won't restate what's been said over and over again, but this is a critical issue for us. And I would like, before I finish, on behalf of the Lanterman Coalition, we would like to thank the committee staff for working very hard on this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm Andy Patterson. I'm with the Autism Business Association, and I also wear the hat. I'm the elected representative for the Orange County Providers for the Regional Center. And we regularly have our meetings, and it's continually the same message that we receive from all the providers, whether it's Adult Day, SLS, Supported Living Services, or ABA, that they cannot staff the folks that they're getting referrals for because they cannot give a competitive wage. As the previous person said, whether it's fast food or other minimum wage jobs are taking the staff away. So the most valuable resource we have, the most finite resource, is the staff, the people that are caring and have the hearts that do this. And it's, like I said, there's nothing more touching and rewarding, but we need to be able to compensate them so that they can stay in the field and raise their family, and we can retain them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Forsberg. I'm a behavior analyst at Autism Behavior Services. I work with a number of these individuals, especially young adults, who are growing up in the system, and they really rely on these services and this funding. The families I've met over the years are just some of the most incredible people you'll ever meet. And I wish you guys were able to see a lot of them here today, but the stories they have and the things they're able to share are just so incredibly powerful and moving. These funding really will help them continue to grow and gain independence and integrate into our society. So thank you guys very much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Marchant, and I'm the Executive Director of the ARC of Placer County. We serve approximately 350 clients with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and I have about 90 staff. I'm here today to talk briefly about the importance of keeping the money in the community. I'll shorten this because I don't want to repeat what everyone else said, but essentially the money is already established for serving this vulnerable population. Just because the doors are shutting to the large buildings doesn't mean the people they were serving are disappearing too. Those people still need services. They will just be receiving them in a different way. The cost of operating day programs and other programs enabling people with IDD to function independently in their communities are the cost of running any other business in California. We have mortgages, rent, transportation costs, salaries, benefits, multiple insurance costs, just to name some of the larger expenses of running a company. Despite the rising costs of running a business, our reimbursement rates don't increase. And in the extremely rare occasion that they do, it's usually targeted to a specific cost such as staffing. While those small increases help that specific cost, they don't help the overall operating costs of our organizations. Furthermore, in the rare instances of increased funding, it usually just offsets the huge cuts we've just sustained for years previous. This industry is constantly just getting by. For example, there is a huge need for serving our aging clients who become more cognitively and physically fragile as they age. My board and I are in the early phases of starting a program to serve our clients who are no longer being able to be served by our current programs. Eager to be able to serve these vulnerable clients, we developed the proposed new program's budget based off of existing rates paid by our regional center and our projected expenses off of our true current expenses associated with our other programs. Our projections to serve these clients will run a $27,000 to $52,000 a year deficit each year. What person in their right mind would start a business knowing it would never make money? That's where we're different. We're not in this industry for making money. We don't have a choice. Our clients need services appropriate for their stages in life. Where does that money come from to cover that deficit? It may or may not come from community donations, desperate attempts at fundraising, and cutting other important services elsewhere in our programs. Or it could come from the existing pot of money that is going to the developmental centers. We're not asking for new money. We're asking for the money that is already designated for our population. Please keep the $500 million in the developmental disability system for our community services. Don't let it get absorbed into the general fund. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Linda Plord. I'm Director of Bayberry in Napa, Santa Rosa, and Clear Lake, California. We cover 4 counties, provide community support services for people with disabilities. So I've been in the field for a long, long time, a few decades. And I was so excited when I joined the regional center team because I was learning a long time ago that there was a promise in California. I worked in other states where there is no promise, and there are long waiting lists. In California, couldn't wait to get started. There was a promise made to people with developmental disabilities. But you know, my excitement quickly faded because I learned we had to fight every single year. Regional centers actually set a day aside every year called Grassroots Day to come fight for funding to support this promise. So, you know, I also lost the excitement about thinking that California was so progressive. Amongst all other states that I worked in. Because why create a promise and then not support it, not back it up? The fight continued in my time with regional centers and now in the community to always ask for our increases that we're supposed to get to support the folks in the community so that they can live out this promise. And the struggle to me really became loud and clear last year and the year before. Our fight became very loud, and we just did not stop. And fortunately, we did get an increase. But beyond that, the fight to have the money follow the consumer, or the client from the developmental centers, has always been there. That's an age-old fight, and we're still here talking about it today. And I'm frankly really tired because managing a community agency is really hard when you can't pay your employees a decent wage. It's really hard when you can't provide the appropriate service because you're just not funded appropriately. So I'd like to urge you, please, let the money follow the consumer into the community. The promise wasn't meant just for people in developmental centers where the funding is outrageous. It's meant for people to live a life they choose in the community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Terry Tribble, and I work for STEP. I am a DSP, and I have to go because I'm about to hit overtime, and I would just hate to take away from her services because they have to pay me more. So I'm going to make this short and sweet. this really feels like a slap in the face that we have to argue for this money. We were here last year and the years before arguing for more funding, and now the money is here, and now we have to fight to keep it, and it just doesn't seem right, let alone fair. And I do represent the DSPs for STEP, so got to go because I'm hitting overtime.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hello, I am Renee Ford, and I was born with cerebral palsy. And fortunately for me, the special school system was so bad, I could have never hoped to mainstream into public schools. My parents were able to send me to a Catholic school who didn't seem to care whether I was disabled or not. And because I come from the time when the school had to consent to take you if you were a disabled person. So, and I progressed. I'm still paying taxes, although I'm not working anymore. I'm still paying taxes, and I've always been a voter. And it's wrong for you to have this money for the developmentally disabled, not follow them, because they're going to go into the community and they're going to have costs. The only reason I can pay for all my dental work is I have a Care credit card. There's no dental insurance available, really, for anyone who doesn't qualify for Medi-Cal. And even with Medi-Cal, the Denti-Cal is limited, my dentist tells me, to getting your teeth pulled out. That's not healthy. And you have to be giving more money to the agencies like STEP. I'm a STEP client. But to all of them, because I have a wonderful micro supervisor who helps me with every aspect of my life, and she's trained to do it. And what she wasn't trained for, STEP taught her. And she's looking at taking a second job. She works very hard, never sits down a minute, 40 hours a week, and she needs a separate job, another job, to start to make ends meet. That is a bad thing. And it's even worse when you say, well, Governor Brown wants the minimum wage to go up, but all of the people funded by agencies like STEP or funded by the IHSS program will not make a dime more. And it's also difficult for members of STEP, if they do qualify for IHSS funding, to find help that will work that, because STEP is able to pay a little bit more. So what funding we have, the disabled community, we should keep. You may say on the budget you're fully funded, but you're not. And more disabled people are having trouble with rent and medication, and there is nowhere to go for that. So I don't know if you could just boost up the wages so we could keep highly trained, proficient people, because my medical needs keep increasing with every single year, then that's what you should do. And if you want me to vote for you, that's what you should do.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, and my roommate also votes.
Oh, watch your feet, 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 watch your feet. Back up. Yeah, you don't know this feet. Yeah, go back. How you go back? Yeah, it's okay. You can. I'm sorry. I was just touching it. No problem, baby. That's what teamwork do. Yes. Teamwork. Hello. How's everybody doing this afternoon?
Wonderful.
Okay, yeah, it's afternoon. Long day.
I am a facilitator with strategies to empower people. As you guys know, y'all been hearing a lot of us speak. STEP. Where should I begin? Lord have mercy. This is beyond a touchy situation. I only started with STEP 4 years ago, but I was raised inside of the deaf community. I am a CODA. I have quite a few brothers and sisters that are deaf. I'm the only one that can hear.
Don't forget your mom is deaf too.
Oh no, I said everybody, girl. Everybody is deaf. Like seriously, being raised in the deaf community and being 8 years old and 7 years old, interpreting for somebody that is an adult is extremely hard. I don't know which way or how could I sit here and express to you how much of a burden it is. I'm 35 now, but I have children. I have one that's hard of hearing. I just found out, my son, and then I have a daughter. Luckily, they already know sign, but it's harder on the children when there is not an adult that can be able to explain to my mother what the landlord said or what SMUD said or what PG&E said, because adults speak in adult terms, and when children try to interpret for an adult, everything gets messed up. And then you have things like this, going on. I would want you guys to really understand that when you cut funding or when you take away from something, you have to understand what you're taking away from. I understand everybody looking at the dollar amount and, what's important and this, that, and the other. Well, you guys don't think that people that are DD are important? I do. It doesn't matter what your ability is, what your disability is. A disability is a disability, especially for people who cannot hear. Do you know how hard it is to tell your mom when she's driving that, oh, Mom, do you hear do you hear ambulance, baby? Thank you. I was looking for the word. Ambulance coming past. Or making sure that she understands in the peripherals and things that are going on around her for a person that can't hear. Has anybody ever thought about putting earplugs in their ear or putting blindfolds over their eyes and see how well you can get around a room or try to sign your name? Things like that. And a lot of that burden falls on young children like myself, because I'm one of them, who take on a lot of that responsibility because it's lack of funding and it's lack of help and it's lack of support. All of that falls in you guys' hands from what my understanding is. I don't really know politics. I can only tell you how it is growing up into a community and now working for a community, because guess what? Really, I'm 35. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. Nothing. I still have to interpret for my mother, and I'm 35 years old. I would rather do it versus her paying, I don't know, a whole lot of money to a person that, I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't understand. But I think that you guys really need to think about where you're taking money from and where you guys are putting it and how y'all dividing it up and how y'all making sure. I understand every category has a purpose. Every category has a importance about, specific category. But when you are disabled, that should be top priority.
Exactly.
That should be top priority. That should be top priority. Because I feel like if I had some support back then when I was 8, 9 years old, I think it'd be great. But I'm 35 now and nothing still has not changed. We really need to start evaluating how we look at things. And technology is moving in a whole new direction. One of our employers, or you guys call them clients, we call them employers, power chairs broke. She came up here anyway. Wrote a whole thing for you guys to see. Nothing will stop their abilities, but it's like, don't take away. Don't take away from the things that they need. They need this. It's really not even so much about the staff, it's about them. Dental appointments, doctor's appointments. You'll be so surprised at how many people that I support that I have to argue and fight with a doctor just to get a mammogram, just to get a pap smear, just to get a real physical. Do you know how hard that is to fight for somebody to get a physical? It's bad. It's extremely bad. And all the doctor can sit here and say is, well, it's not in their budget. Well, we don't cover it. I'm like, and what type of doctor are you? Don't you go about ethics and codes? Then they'll start to help when I start to challenge them. But it's like, I have to go through so much just to get someone to help somebody that is disabled. How fair is that to them? How fair is that? I've been doing this since 8 years old, so I can just imagine you know, the frustration, the aggravation. So this is years of aggravation that you guys get. Sorry. But it's like, you got to be able to help. And you got to be able to evaluate each situation, not just saying, oh, well, we gave them money this year, so they don't get none. We gave them money 2 years ago, so they don't get none. Oh, we ain't never touched this, so we're going to give all the money to them, and we'll do all the money to this. And then you leave people out that are really important, that really, in actuality, need it. And technology is growing, and I keep saying that because I noticed that the worse that technology is getting, the more money and more funding that people that are DD will need. You have a very hard time. Going to the DMV is the most worst thing in America. Trying to get an interpreter to sign for somebody and just to try to get an ID or just to renew it, it's difficult. Because, oh, I don't understand what you're saying. Oh, I don't understand what you're saying. It's difficult, just period. I don't know. Thank y'all for listening.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good afternoon. I'm Desiree Pollard. I am another STEP employee. And I just want to say, keep the promise. Thank you. And I know you guys have a very hard job, and you're just trying to help everybody you can. And sometimes you can't help everybody, but try to put the money in the right place. Yeah. And I just want to say thank you for your time. And just think about like this young lady over here who looked like she said she's about to be far from 80, but don't look it. She is absolutely right. It's like, it's hard. And you just don't understand unless you do the walk. Just like it could be your family or someone else that you know that might need this help. So I just want to say keep the promise and just do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other public comment at this time on this issue? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the committee for any questions that you may have. Assemblymember Mathis, since you're also on the committee, I wanted to give you an opportunity to close if you wanted to on this issue.
I think first I'd like to thank everybody who managed to get here, who found a way to communicate their concerns. I understand it's extremely difficult. I think there's never enough that could be said in regards to these issues. To say that the budget is necessary and to the level where it should be when we continue to have problems, I think to better serve our disabled populations, to say there's a level that's enough, I think is just wrong. And I think the measure that I've brought forward that I know all the members of the committee have discussed, I think we found the error in the budget a few months ago when we went over this, and I look forward to having all of my colleagues' support on this moving forward, hopefully. I think it's the right thing to do, and I definitely think that it would be in poor taste of government to allow the money to be lost in the general fund, and it should stick with those who need it the most. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for bringing this forward. Staff has recommended holding this advocacy proposal open at this time, and so with that, we're going to move back to issue 2 if we can. Thank you, everybody.